Hey, this is Ralph, and in this video I want to finish doing a demonstration for this layout quiz that we had in CIS 195. So in the previous video, we did this simple layout right here on the top left corner, red on top, blue on the bottom, and you can see the example of it right there. Cool, pretty satisfied with that. Now for this video, we're going to tackle both of these remaining two. They're similar in that they still have the same black and green outer container borders, but then our red block and blue block are now going to be side by side instead of vertically oriented. And the only difference between these two is obviously the red and the blue block on that third one, they're pushed out a little bit further, so they look like they're getting outside of their containers, their parent containers. Well, first thing we need to do is we need to alter our styling so that these two block elements are side by side. So currently they're one on top of the other. We need to remedy that. Now I still have the page that I was making before. I'm just going to tweak the same page. Now if you were doing this quiz for me, then you had to have 3 separate files so that way I could see, each distinct layout. Although the HTML doesn't have to change at all. So what we want to do to get these elements side by side, a couple ways to do it. Some students may have used float left on one, float right on the other. That would take care of it. And then of course you want to establish the width once you put that float on there. I should be able to give you a quick example of that. I should be able to do it right up here. So I could do something like float left width, and I'll just put in 50%. We'll see what that does. That could be too wide. And then I'll go to blue block, float right, width 50%. Let's make sure I use a semicolon there. And you can see, all right, well, that gets those red blocks and blue blocks side by side. Actually, that worked out pretty well. Now you're probably thinking, oh, wait, what about the height of the green bordered container and the black bordered container? Well, once we start floating these objects, we have to have a clear fix, and a really simple one here. I can go to the inner container and I can do overflow hidden, and that will allow that inner container to accommodate that those blocks. Now if I look back at my picture, it's actually pretty darn close. Obviously a little taller in the visual aid there, but that would have worked just fine. So for students that may have done the float technique, yeah, you would have been good. Just stick with that. That's perfectly fine. I'm going to undo that. So I'm going to get rid of the overflow hidden on the parent container. I'm going to get rid of the float and width on the red block. I'm going to get rid of the float and width on the blue block. That should put me back to where I was before. This time though, I'm going to use a flexbox solution. So the inner container is the parent for the red and the blue block. So I'm going to do a display flex on those. And that will, should have given them some height, but their width is all shrunk up. So let me do this. I'm going to go to the red block and the blue block as a unit here. And let's put in a flex 1, 0 auto. That's a flex grow of 1, flex shrink of 0, flex basis of auto. Just needed to refresh. And now we've got those blocks again side by side. So that method maybe require just a wee bit less styling. Display flex on the parent, and then the children are flex 1, 0, and auto. That allows them to fill up and expand that space, and of course the height could be adjusted easily enough if we wanted to make it look even more like the picture. Now those are taller. Okay, cool, I can handle that. Now in the visual aid for the third one, red and blue blocks are side by side, but notice they're much further out. I'm going to be a little bit more specific with the positioning, and I am going to use positioning on these. So let's see. On the styling for my red and blue blocks, I'm going to set them to have a position. You know what? Instead of, I was going to do a position absolute, what if I just do a position relative? Let's see what happens with that. Now for the red block, I'm going to position that left negative 200 pixels, and we'll just see what happens. And then for the blue block, I'll position it from the right negative 200 pixels. And we can start to see that's actually kind of doing what I want it to do. So let's see if we can't figure out what's going on with this. Now when I position relative, that's good for nudging it left, from the top, left, bottom, right, whatever. Now, if I did something 0 pixels from the left, that would have been the default location of that red block, and we wouldn't have noticed any difference in its location there. So by putting in a negative number, I'm moving it to the left of its default location. And I just picked 200 pixels. I think I might still be satisfied with that number. And then similarly, my blue block, if it was 0 pixels from the right, it would be in its default location. But by going negative 200 pixels, it goes beyond its default location. So I think I'm pretty satisfied with that. However, I think the illusion would look a little bit better if my outer container had maybe more padding on the left and the right. Actually, the body. So my body has 50 pixels of padding on all around. I'm going to change that to 50 pixels top and bottom, 100 pixels left and right. And that will bring in the overall body container. So I think it still looks pretty good. In fact, I'll exaggerate that. Let's maybe 200 pixels. There we go. So now we can really see that happening. And now we're more like this shape down here is my third visual aid. And we're still going to have a bit of flex with this web page. Yeah, so I think that's pretty good. Now, the goal for this quiz was not to make mobile-friendly pages. So obviously, if our web pages are really narrow, then things just go all to hell, although that looks kind of neat to me. Our goal here was just to make these desktop layouts that had a small amount of flex to them, which allowed us to avoid any horizontal scrolls. So pages still flex a little bit if the browser is narrower or wider. Well, that takes care of our Quiz 6 solution for our layouts. Thanks for hanging out with me.